And opinions expressed on Writers in Focus are those of the individual participants and are presented for the purpose of discussion only. No endorsements by Atlanta Fulton Public Library System or Fulton County government are intended, and none should be presumed. Hi, welcome to Writers in Focus. I'm your host, James Taylor, and today I'm delighted to have as my guest Mr. Klarque Garrison. May I call you Clark?
Absolutely.
I'd like to welcome
Please
you
do.
to the Fulton County Government Center in the Atlanta Fulton Public Library. We're here to talk about your book, How to Survive the Next 365.
Right.
Let me introduce you by saying that you're a businessman.
Yes.
You're a metaphysical information junkie.
Absolutely.
I've got to throw in the fact that you're an ex-model, you're a motivational speaker,
Right.
you're a writer, a publisher, a truth seeker, a radio host, an internet blogger, and someone who several years ago just walked into my office and said, I've written a book. At the time, I was teaching a workshop on how to get published,
Right.
and I said, Mr. Garrison, would you please address my students on whether it's better to self-publish or publish with a traditional, and you talked and you blew me away because you said that you had written and marketed this book by yourself,
Right.
and it was about how to succeed. In other words, if I read your book correctly, Clark, you wrote a book about getting your life together and succeeding and achieving your goals. Am I wrong?
No, you're dead on.
Okay.
You're 100%.
So let's start at the beginning. It's 2008. There's a guy running for re-election now,
Right.
but 4 years ago he was elected, and this gave you some kind of purpose, some breakthrough, the kick in the butt to go ahead. You talk.
Well, you're right. 2008 was a monumental year for me, especially because it was a year almost everything in my life collapsed. I was a real estate guru for many years, 15 years, having been quite successful. You know, there's ups and downs.
No, wait a second. It's in the book, but
Yeah.
how successful?
I had
And
amassed-
your wife is here too,
Right.
so you can't lie.
Well, let me put it this way. I lost over $1 million in assets. and
Okay,
land. So-
you owned homes
Right.
and then the real estate bubble. And,
Absolutely. The so-called American dream, I think at that point, what I perceived to be the American dream, I had achieved.
and it caught everybody unawares, but you had achieved.
Yeah, I certainly would say that we were living a life that I dreamed of, in the place that I dreamed I'd live it in. And funny, I still wasn't happy. Because what I found out is that when the thing that you put on the pinnacle is money, then you're always chasing it.
Okay.
And even when you have a lot, you still want more. And as fate would have it in 2008, all of that was taken away. And so we had a series of catastrophes that just kept unfolding. I mean, everyone knows it. Everyone was affected by it in some way, shape, or form.
You know what's interesting? When I read the book, you lived a rather charmed life by anybody's standards. You had a mother who loved you.
Absolutely.
You went to high school. You went to college. You went to Florida A&M.
Florida A&M.
Not only did you go to that venerable school, you were a drum major for one of the greatest bands in the history of band music
Right,
in America.
right. One of the greatest achievements for me.
You kind of cruised through college
Yep.
because you're intelligent. You didn't go to classes and you didn't keep up with your studies, but nevertheless you succeeded.
Right.
You wanted to be a model. People said you can't be a model.
Can't do that.
And then you lived the good life, like South Beach, Miami,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
You can't beat it. I mean, if you had
I'm
told
setting
me,
you up for this.
if you told me that's where I would be, I would have thought you crazy. But I had been through a lot as a youth. I was an angry youth. I was frustrated
With
by
all that, you weren't happy.
No, I wasn't. I was always thinking I was missing out on something. And coming from a single family environment, my anger, I think, looking back, was really pointed at not having a father. Where was he? Now, the good thing is I did reattach myself and re-meet my father in my late years. So it's a happy ending on it. But at that time, I was frustrated, even though I had a mother who really provided all the fundamental basis that a child would need, including tough love.
Yep.
When I got to South Beach and I find myself, meeting stars and actors I had met on.
It was the high life,
It was
right?
the high life.
We see it on commercials
The
and
beach
TV.
is
Yeah.
3 walks from where I am,
yeah.
and I live this every day. But I found myself in South Beach being miserable. All of the things I thought would happen didn't unfold itself out there. I think that was the story of my life as a youth. Is growing up, I'm always looking for the next. What am I going to do now? And that's what morphed into finally hitting rock bottom in 2008. This book was in me somewhere.
No, I'd like to be dramatic because this is television.
Okay.
But when you say it's 2008, you've always wanted to be a writer. But like so many people, what's the motivation? You don't know what to do, if I read correctly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you've got the talent, you've got the brains. You can do basically anything you want, but you decide, and you've made your money in real estate, but you've almost lost it, but you're still solvent.
Right.
And so you say to yourself, I'm going to write this book because Obama won the election, and that was it's a movie, but did that really happen?
Well, it did. Obama.
I'm not making this up?
No, you're not. His election did not. Here's what the election did for me. When he announced, as he was accepting his that it was up to us now. It's not that Obama is now the president and everything's going to change overnight. It's now I'm presenting hope, because who would ever thought an African American or a black man in this case would become president? I mean, that's something that I, 40-something years old, would never have thought in my lifetime, but here it is. So when I saw the change and his challenge of, it's up to us, I took that personally.
Wow.
And that's kind of what set this in motion instead of jumping off a bridge, which I considered. No, I'm joking.
No.
But it was bad. So, most people are looking at, woe is me. I looked at what can I do now? And what I started doing after that is interviewing and talking to people who weren't in this so-called catastrophe. Because in spite of what the news media cycles shows you every day of everybody's in this whole disarray, I always tell people Kobe Bryant doesn't know we're in a recession. He has no clue of what we're talking about because he's making millions and millions of dollars a day. So it's really about your perception. So I needed to find people who had a better perception and perspective than me. And so I started interviewing people who are still successful, still financial solvent, still healthy, still spiritually grounded through all of this. And I started asking them out. Can I just, take you out for lunch? Can I have a cup of coffee with you to find out what it was that you did that I didn't do? And that's a lot of what I wrote down in my mind, because this was for me at first. This book was not going to be for anyone else other than my therapy. And so what I found out is that, wow, I came up with 12 really powerful steps that, by the way, this is no secret. None of these things were a secret to me. I was taught all this stuff. But one thing about when you gain success, sometimes you put these things on the shelf and you think that, it's my good looks, it's my charm, all of these things are why I'm successful instead of the principles which we talk about.
Sure. We're going to talk about how to survive the next 365. That's the title of your book. But it's funny, I told you before the interview, I've interviewed a lot. I've read a lot of books about self-help, metaphysical knowledge and stuff like that. But from Dennis Kimbrough to Napoleon Hill to Dale Carnegie, it's not that complicated. You just said that you did the same thing that people like Kimbrough did. What's the secret of success? I'm going to go out and ask people who are successful what they did. And 9 times out of 10, maybe 99 times out of 100, they have a lot in common.
Yeah.
And you have 12 points, suspiciously like 12 steps. With
right. No, I get it.
You're no fool.
Absolutely.
But let's. The big thing that I take away from the book is that the secret of success and happiness resides within us. It's a lesson that Christ taught. It's a lesson that the Buddha taught. It's a lesson that Muhammad said. It's not here, it's not there, it's not a pile of money, it's in. Talk about that. Well,
the first thing we do when we're looking for something, right, if we look outward, very seldom do we believe that the power or anything that we need lies within ourselves. That's why we read self-help books.
Yeah.
That's why we go to church. That's why we do all these things that are outwardly instead of sitting and realizing, as someone's told me, it's the ability to believe in you. And once we understand that, then it changes the dynamics of everything we think and believe and do. So one of the things I like to say, this book is not a self-help book. A self-help book is this. You write down 7 steps to do this or 12 steps to do this. But the problem with that is you're living someone else's perception of what is success and the steps to get there. So if you read a book, well, you're living that person's life. You may not be their age, their race, their gender, their creed, their location in the world may all be different to you. So when you try to follow their steps, what happens? You may fail. And if you fail, then you either do two things. You say the writer is full of it, or you say I'm a failure.
Right.
Those are the two things you come up with, right? So what I like to think of this book as a guide. It's simply understanding fundamental principles that have been around since the dawn of time, and giving you, I'd like to say, I'm giving you a roadmap to believe in yourself. And once you do that, then this book is pretty much on autopilot.
What I like about the book is that it's a distillation of the truths that you find in many, many books.
Oh, absolutely.
You go into any bookstore, go into any library, and as a librarian, it's like the 158.1 Dewey Decimal section.
Right.
And it's probably the most popular section of books next to financial self-help.
Right.
Everybody will tell you what it means, what it takes to be successful. You spell it out basically in 120 pages in 12 steps. Can we give it a shot?
Please, let's go
Step
through.
number one, have a game plan. What do you mean? How do you find out what you want to do? I mean, that seems to me the hardest step.
Well, I think innately we all have this dream of what we want to do and want to be, right? Well, we have certain fears that won't allow us to do them. I want to be a writer, but I can't write. So then you check that off your board of things to do.
Okay.
So you try to move on something that you feel you can, instead of saying, you know what, I want to be a writer. Let me set a plan up to becoming one. And because you're not familiar with the technique, if I want to be a race car driver at 40-something years old, that seems incredibly impossible to do, right?
But some have done it. Go ahead.
Right.
If they want to do it.
wanted to do it. So let's set up a plan. Well, one of the first things we do and set up a game plan that I talk about is find someone who's doing what you're doing. Because they'll tell you the steps that it takes to get there. And what I think we do is we dream, which is good, and then we say we want to do something, and we run right out the door and try to do it. And then we fall on our face, or we meet someone who tells us we can't do it. And we run into all these other roadblocks instead of sitting down first and drawing a game plan. When I wrote this book, I knew I had never written a book before. So was it complicated? I didn't know. So first things I started doing is researching writers, people who wrote about how to write, like Anne Lamott and Bird by Bird, and Natalie Goldberg.
Even
writing
Stephen
down the
King
books.
has a good book
Stephen
on
King.
yeah.
So there's many books out there, but I studied that first. Then I started talking to people who had written books, and I found a guy that actually lives here who wrote a self-help, a self-published book, help book, that was from Marietta. And I read all of his stuff. Before I took the first step to trying to be a writer, I went and researched it. And I think that's the part we skip. We just jump out there and think, well, you know, I'll figure it out as I go.
It's funny, these truths are like self-evident. They're also common sense. I just answered my own question in many ways. How can you have a plan if you don't know what you're doing?
Right.
If you don't know what you're doing, what did Lewis Carroll say? If you don't know where you're going, any place will get you there.
Right, any place.
So I'm just thinking, like, I play a lot of chess, and like even at a beginning level, if you don't have a plan, you'll get destroyed. The worst plan is better than no plan.
Right.
So have a plan.
Have a plan, and not just a plan, a specific plan. I think, again, we say, well, I want to be a painter. Well, what kind of painter? What mediums do you want to use? Where do you want to start? Where do you want to go? We're not specific. I want to be rich. Well, how rich? What's rich for you? How are you going to take those steps? What are you going to do with the money when you get it?
Right.
So in this chapter, we talk about being specific in what you're going to be and having that plan, not just writing a generalized plan. Write it out so you can smell it and breathe it.
Second step, and this is dear to my heart as a librarian, is the power of writing.
Right.
Klarque, explain to the audience what writing does to an individual. When you start writing things down, wait 24 hours, go back and see what, it's liberating.
It is.
Talk about that, please.
Well, you know, some of the best books were written out of travesties and hard times and catastrophes. And it is because writing has life. I always say reading and writing is something that's missing out of our education system right now, it's not that important. As long as I have an iPhone, I'm good, you know. But I think what reading does is it expands the boundaries in one's mind. So it allows the mind to actively start to grow. And what I think writing does is it takes those things that you put in and it brings them to life. It actually creates. I was telling my son the other day, we pointed out a car. I said that car was not invented from someone's thought in their mind. They had to write down a blueprint so that someone else could come along and create it based on what he wrote. the guy just saying, hey, I got a great style I want you to do. It's right here, and it's perfect. It's the best thing you've ever seen. Well, it's not going to go anywhere in your mind. So writing is not only liberating, it relieves from stress, it gives you creativity, and it's the way that things are birthed. Everything that we see around ourselves right now was created by someone writing it down. So that's a step we cannot and must not.
No, it's a powerful chapter to me because I use this sometimes. Like if you're angry, if you're so emotional that you say, I can't do this, or this person is so upsetting to me, my job is write it down and wait 24 hours. Then pick it up and, did I feel that way yesterday?
Right.
I felt that way yesterday? There's something wrong. Like,
And
and
you
then,
believe it,
then you realize, like, I'm wasting my time being angry. That kind of stuff. Yeah.
We talk about in the
Yeah.
chapter of how to use negative thoughts. Most of the time we're taught, if you have a negative thought, don't say it. Don't utter it. Push it back as far as you can. I think what you do then is you procrastinate that negative thought.
Yeah.
What I tell people to do is write it down. Let your mind empty it out. And what happens is, as you're writing down all the things, I'm too short, I'm fat, I'm dumb, I don't have any skills, or I'm lazy. As you start writing these things down, you lessen the power of those things. And because your mind is seeing those things as not true, because you aren't those things. Those are just the behavior in the way that you feel at the moment. So once you start exhausting yourself, your mind gets bored with it. Okay, we get it. And so there's so many things we talk about you can do with the power of writing. But I tell people, fall in love with it. It's really liberating.
And just as an aside, I know of many great authors who have just jotted down things that become great novels. You forget about the grammar, forget about the spelling. That will correct itself, or just get spell check or
That's
whatever.
what editors for, right?
That's what editors are for. But
Right.
the thoughts come down.
Right.
Get those nouns and verbs down.
Yeah, just get them out.
The third chapter is probably the most difficult for a lot of people. It is for, I can give you many examples in my own life, but pruning your tree.
Right.
I used to be a smoker. When you see people smoke, you see a crowd of smokers. You don't see smokers hanging around someone who doesn't smoke. You know where I'm getting at.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Or like, he's my
100%
drinking buddy. I don't do anything else with him, but I drink. Well, why are you drinking?
Right.
Will you talk about that? Prune your tree.
I will. It's one of
It's
humans.
tough to do.
It's very tough to do, but we're the only thing in nature that finds it impossible to do. The only thing you can find in nature, and I use the tree as an example, when the tree has dead leaves on it because the seasons are changing, right? The tree, because of those leaves, have been with it for a whole season, and it's part of the tree.
Yeah.
The tree doesn't mourn the leaves or say, well, they're dead, I got to keep them on anyway until next year, and just has a bunch of brown leaves on it. When the leaves are no longer facilitating a service for the tree, and they die, the tree allows it to fall off so that new leaves can be birthed. And I think that's a metaphor for what we don't do. So we'll have someone around us in our circle of influence, right, who means us no harm. We hate when they come around. They really are negative. They never say a positive thing about what we're doing or what they're doing. But we'll keep them around because they're a cousin, or I knew them 20 years ago. And that's what we do. We're in bad relationships, we're in bad situations, and we stay in those things. And what this chapter talks about is you have to make those tough decisions and do what nature calls you to do and release those things. And what happens when you release them is new positive leaves spring up.
Yep.
But you never know, because most of us will bite the bullet and just.
See if I'm recalling this right, Clark, but you find out who your true friends are when you prune the people who are bad for you. I had it like last Sunday. There's a big football game on. I know I have to prepare for this interview.
Right.
I've got to work on Monday. A friend of mine calls up and he says, "Hey, come on over. We're having a couple of drinks and we're going to watch the football game." And I said, "No, I can't make it." My friend said, "I understand. You have to work." Another person might have said, "Oh, what kind of guy are you?"
Right.
Get rid of that person. Get rid of that person, because he didn't realize that he didn't have my interest in her.
Right.
Yeah. Am I saying? You know what I'm talking about?
This is exactly.
You're the expert.
This is exactly the line of questioning you need to go through.
Right.
And one thing I'll point out, after every chapter as we go, there's an assignment
exercise
that we have you do. It's an exercise, and one of the exercises in this is to really simplify it is you're asking you're thinking about the circle of influence of the people around you. And I think we use the 10 closest people outside of your mother, your father, your siblings. And then we're asking a series of questions about where their relevance in your life is. How do you feel when they come around? Do you feel happy, sad? Do you wish they not come? When they ring the phone, when you see their number on your phone or their name on your phone, do you just hit,
Yeah.
quiet and put it back in your pocket, or are you excited to see them? So these are some of the line of questionings we ask
Sure.
that really tell it all. I mean, you can lie to yourself all you want, but when you ask these questions, if you answer a certain way, then you know that may be a situation you need to prune. Now, by pruning, I don't mean eliminate totally from your life. We're not saying that you had a guy who's a friend for 25 years and now you don't speak to him. But now you have a position where he's going to play a role in your life. Because if he plays a close enough role, you're going to wind up just like that person's, a la the smoker analogy, which, by the way, that's how I started smoking so many years ago. I don't anymore, but I hung around a guy who smoked on South Beach every night. Eventually, I became a smoker.
Wow, I can't believe we're just rushing through this interview. We've got 12 steps, but the next step, I'm going to put you on the spot
we'll make
because your beautiful wife is in the studio, and yet you say in your fourth chapter that have one day a week, make it special, do what you want to do to make you a better person, and that means alone. Go out to dinner alone, see a movie alone. How can you do that if you're married? If you if a friend, you're being selfish, Klarque. No, I'm setting you up.
In a sense, you are, but you're being selfish so that you can be better for your, in this case, your spouse. My wife wants me to go out.
Yeah.
Please get out the house. It's about being in love with yourself. I think this is a very difficult thing. Most people don't like themselves, and the big test is. Can you be alone with yourself for any amount of time with no radio, no anything? And most people don't want to hear their thoughts. They don't want to speak to themselves. So this process is about loving you and dating yourself. So we say give yourself a date. And I know that's hard for people who may not be self-employed or entrepreneurs, but we start off small. Give yourself an hour. Carve out an hour in out of the whole week that is just going to be about you and what you wanted to do. And that's not get on the phone, email, text, or call your friends. And it's being with yourself. We all have something we love to do, whether it's reading, writing, going to see a movie, a play, something positive, I should say. And these are the times you use those to do. And once you start doing them and you expand, now you do 2 hours, a half a day, and then finally a full day, you'll never want to leave that time period again, and you'll cherish it. And people will start respecting that as your time. It took me a while when I started because people still call you and think that their emergencies are your emergencies. But through that time period, you start winning them like, oh, well, that's Klarque. He's not going to answer the phone this day.
I'm going to skip ahead because we're running out of time. But gratitude, watch what you do and say. Stop complaining, just get back in the game. One of my favorite books is written by a psychiatrist who the patient comes in and says, I don't know what I'm going my husband has left me and he's a drunk and I'm eating too much and my children hate me. And the psychiatrist says, well, what are you going to do next? And that's in your that's the chapter, isn't it?
It is.
It's not up to someone else to. I'm getting ahead of myself. I want you to talk. My favorite one is be a slave to service, the art of giving. The irony of self-help is that in order to better yourself, you must give. Benjamin Mays, one of my heroes, once said, "You judge a person not by how much they have, but by how much they give." And you explain the truth of that because it's counterintuitive.
It is, but yet it's a fundamental universal law.
Yeah.
Even in karma, the only way.
I'm glad you said that. Yeah.
Even in karmatic law, right? The only way that you can, if you do something that is bad, the only way that you can be reprieved from that is by doing a service to others, not to yourself. So it's everywhere we look. We just hate that concept for some reason, especially in the United States, because we're driven to consumption and have and how much can I get and what are you going to give me? And so it's very tricky sometimes when you try to retrain people and say, well, the way that you give or get is to give. And the more you give, the more you get. It's cyclical. It's
it makes sense,
fundamental principles, yet it's very difficult. So one, to wake up each day, even when you don't have anything, right? Even when you're poor, and say, well, you know what, today I'm going to help someone else. And that doesn't have to be a big thing. That can be help someone across the street. Tell someone something nice. I do this all the time. Just pick 3 people randomly and call them in your phone since you have 600 people in there. Yeah. Call them and just say something nice. to them just out of the blue, and you will have profound effect on other people in that way.
I'm thinking about the people out there in TV land who want to get in touch with you.
Right.
My favorite way to get in touch with you is just go to Google, my favorite search engine, and type in Klarque with a K.
With a K.
Larque,
Right.
Garrison.
I'm the only one there.
It's the first hit.
Right.
What will they find there?
They will find our website, which it kind of keeps people up with what we're doing. They will find I am a host of a talk radio show
Yep.
and network. That usually comes up next, Survival Radio Network. They will find all of our social media. We're out there on Twitter land, LinkedIn, Facebook, you name it. And then they'll find a lot of interviews like this that I've been graciously asked to do.
Thank you.
And what a pleasure it is to do this interview with you.
On that note, I'd like to thank you very much for being here. My guest has been Klarque Garrison. He is the author of How to Survive the Next 365. In my humble opinion, it's a great little book. It's a distillation of truths. If you want to get better in your life, read Klarque Garrison's book. Thanks a lot, Klarque.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
That was fun. Comments and opinions expressed on Writers in Focus are those of the individual participants and are presented for the purpose of discussion only. No endorsements by Atlanta Fulton Public Library System or Fulton County government are intended, and none should be presumed.